Hi, everybody. Today we're going to create some very expressive floral art. We are going to explore once again how to paint without drawing. So, if you find drawing difficult or intimidating, this can be a helpful approach. So, you can simply dive straight into painting, and that's exactly what we are going to do today. So to begin with, I'm staining the background and I'm making it intentionally expressive, almost chaotic. So it's going to be busy and vibrant, unlike the minimalist work that we often do. And I'm also taking this opportunity to roughly map out where I want the key elements to go, like the position of the vase, the shadows, the leaves, and the general structure of the flowers. It's quite similar to what we did a few weeks ago with the horse paintings. And I'm adding a few touches of oil pastel just to enhance the expression and drama. I'm not using brushes for this. I'm working with a palette knife. And as you can see, I'm just tapping into the canvas. There is no drawing involved. And yet, it is still clear what the subject is. So that's really the goal of today's session, okay? To show you how much you can represent without any drawing at all. And yes, it is an abstraction, but yet it's still very figurative. Basically, if you want to paint, it's more important to know about composition than drawing itself. You can have a beautiful drawing, you can have a beautiful theme, but if the elements are not well organized within the given space, it still won't work. That's why sometimes you see very well painted things, be it portraits of flowers or anything, and yet it still lacks something. And in the other hand, you can look at an abstract painting where there is absolutely nothing that you, at least at first, recognize. It's just, expression made with color, and yet it still conveys emotion to you. It still makes you want to see more of that. And most times it's because how the composition was arranged, how the elements within the given space were arranged. Okay. So we'll repeat this process a few times throughout the video. And I always encourage you to work in a series. Whatever you're painting, try creating 3 or 4 pieces for session using the same method. Because even if you use the same technique, each result will be unique. It's a fantastic way to learn, to understand your own practice, to see how your colors behave, to observe how the layers interact, and to get a feel for your chosen medium. Speaking of mediums, I'm using acrylics once again, mainly because it dries quickly. However, aside from watercolors, you can absolutely use this technique with almost any medium, oils, gouache, acrylics, and so on, okay? The 6 paintings you're going to see today were all completed within 80 to 90 minutes. So it was something like 10 to 15 minutes each. So yes, they were quick studies. In the next piece, we'll use the same method, but instead of the palette knife, we'll paint with a sponge. If you want to try this, start with the background and build up layer by layer. Begin with a base color then establish the ground, followed by the shadows, then the flowers at the back, and work forward from there, okay? Closer and closer to the viewer. Now, just so you know, there are professional grade foam brushes available for this sort of work. But the reason I stick with kitchen sponges is simple. They are easy to find. If you want to get similar results, you don't need to go to an art supply shop. You just head to your kitchen drawer and voila, you have your sponge. The professional ones often have a handle, which makes them easier to work with and much cleaner as well. But the outcome will mostly be the same. The main advantage of the professional sponge foam brushes is that it saves your hands from getting messy. If you're handling paint with bare hands, you sure will get dirty, okay? So once again, I'm using the sponge to loosely mark the features of the painting, the vase, the flowers, and so on. From there, I simply add color. I'm using the knife to apply the paint, but spreading it with the sponge. My aim here is to do as much of the painting as possible using just the sponge to show you that you don't need to draw and you don't even need a model. You can start painting right away. I'm just using my imagination to bring the flowers to life. Hey. Of course, you can use a model, but what I'm trying to say is that it's not even necessary, okay? You might hear Tom barking in the background. He was looking at something happening in the street, so yes, he's participating too. I am adding a small touch of the pastels again, but to be honest, I ended up regretting it because it wasn't even necessary. Now, for this next piece, we're going to approach things a bit differently. This time, I'm not staining the background. I'm leaving the paper as it is and adding the elements directly, the flowers, the vase, and everything. This way, you can clearly see the difference between working on a stained background and a plain one. You don't have to like this style or these compositions. What I do want you to take away is that it is okay to experiment. Try new mediums, new colors, new tools, anything within reach. Step out of your usual way of working. Do something different. You will be surprised by how much you can learn, even if you never use this technique again. Now, I must confess, my original plan for the day was actually to use this technique with portraits. But since we spent the past 2 weeks doing portrait work, I thought I would like to make something different just for the sake of variety. So, that said, we will revisit this approach with portraits and maybe also animal paintings and even landscapes. So maybe as soon as next week, okay? And I think it'll make for a very compelling exercise. Now I am using the palette knife again. And if you've never tried one before, don't worry, they are very straightforward. They let you spread the paint in a very expressive way and create some very lovely textures. Of course, if you prefer, you can achieve something similar with a brush, but I'm just using the knife so that you can see how it works in practice. As you can see, I'm using the knife simply to mark the paint. There is no defined shape, there's no drawing, there's no outline. It's just a pure organized chaos, if that makes sense to you. But you can still clearly tell that it's a vase of flowers. For the next one, I'm using black paper and I'm staining the background with a creamy tone. As I've mentioned before, I tend to avoid using pure white or pure black. And I always add a mix of blue and burnt umber to add depth and life to the color. Okay. And again, there is no precise shape, just a blur of this creamy white. But as I build up the layers, it gradually begins to suggest the roses. So let me show you this one slowly so you can really see the process. It's just a blob of color, and as I add more detail, it begins to take form. And please, 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 please resist the urge to add splatters, okay? Just don't, okay? It's the artistic equivalent to wearing flip flops on a wedding ceremony, okay? You can, of course, but it doesn't work. It looks out of place. A lot of people are using splattering as a shortcut to add drama and interest, but it often ends up distracting from the piece. There are times when splatters are appropriate, and we'll explore that in another session. But don't just throw them in for the sake of it, okay? In this piece, I added a touch of color because the paper was so dark, the result looked a little bit grayish and lifeless. So to warm it up, after it was completely dry, I gave it a light wash of burnt umber, and that alone gave the piece a subtle sepia tone, so it looks much warmer. This next one is simply to demonstrate how darker tones behave on colored paper. The results are fairly similar, but personally, I prefer working with lighter tones on dark backgrounds. If I had used the same cream color from the previous painting, I think this one would have looked much better. It still works, but it could have been stronger with that contrast, okay? And finally, as a bonus for today, here's just one more. Once again, I'm working on white paper, but I don't like leaving it plain. So I give it a soft amber wash to warm up the background a little. And I'm painting the roses using only the palette knife. There's no defined shape, it's just a block of color. And yet, you can immediately tell what it is. No detail, no refinement, and still, it clearly reads as a rose. I added a little cream here and there for highlights, but honestly, it wasn't even necessary. And now, look at these leaves. Look how simple this is. There's truly absolutely nothing complicated here. I'm just pressing the knife onto the paper and letting the shapes suggest themselves. No drawing, no prep, and yet I'm sure you can see what it is. If you try to tell me that you cannot do this, okay, we need to have a talk, a serious talk, okay? So these are the results of what we've done today. I hope this helps you simplify your process. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.